ready? We're going to go back to
Yep.
the finance place. If you could go back to Derek DiBetrillo when you were 25, man, and you were probably in your prime right around there. Right around.
I don't think I was ever in my prime.
If you can go back to when you were 25, what financial advice would you give yourself?
The credit cards. Stay away from the damn credit cards. Those are the biggest. That's the toughest thing with people when they get credit cards. I think people think that that's how they can get by is with credit cards. And that's how I did it. You just started using credit cards for, if you're on a certain budget, especially if you only make a certain amount of money, and you use the credit cards, I'll go out and a lot of people I'll put on my credit card, you just give me the cash, right? And people take the cash, and that's how you get by. Or you use credit cards for groceries, basic needs, stuff like that. And before you know it, your credit card is skyrocketing through the roof. Your interest rates are high, and then you have to try to consolidate, and then you're paying even higher. So yeah, that's my biggest thing. I don't know why Brett has a smile on his face. He must.
Oh, that's smut.
Yeah, all the smut I spent on
all the alcohol.
Actually, no, because back then I can't even use that as an excuse. Because back then it wasn't like I don't even think the internet was really big then, so I couldn't even use it for smut back then.
It's funny that you say that last thing there, because imagine if it was easiest to use a credit card back in the 90s as it was. And I never thought of that.
You had the slide thing with the what's that paper that went over it?
Yeah, you slide it across. You got a receipt, like a little receipt paper.
You still have to do it.
$200 if she goes like this. Smut.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Three Guys podcast. We're glad you were able to join. I know personally how busy you are. You're probably
now that I'm in the office, I was like, oh, I gotta go home.
No. We started with sort of where you're from. Talk a little bit about where you grew up, where you live now. Touch on sort of how we work together, what you do professionally. I think it's kind of an interesting job. It's sort of new to our industry. And then you can beat us all up about how bad we all are with our spending, especially the guy on my top left. I won't say which one it is.
Okay. Yeah. So
Rats.
I am 31. I am originally from upstate New York. So Catskills, very small town, country. I know when people think New York, they're like immediately city, but not at all like that. Grew up like my grandpa had a farm, so very rural. So did that. All my family is still back in New York, and I currently live in San Diego.
And student loans are one of the bigger problems people have, especially coming out of college and seeing that first payment come in and trying to make payments. So is that what triggered you to get involved with financing, especially at a young age?
Yeah. So my personal student loans weren't terrible. My parents had helped out a ton. So like for me, I maybe ended up with like 25,000 in student loans, which in the grand scheme of things is like nothing.
Yes, you're right.
But my husband wasn't as savvy in his spending, we'll say. And he, in school, they give you all these loans, and then if you don't end up using it, you still have it. So, he'd be like, oh, I got leftover money. I'm going to go on a shopping spree or something like that. And not realizing, hey, I'm, got 9% interest on this. And by the time he got out, again, he went to PT school. So he was in school for like his entire life. So that was like 7 years. And the PT school is what, we ended up with, almost $200,000 in student loans. So that was what really triggered it. And seeing that interest, like we weren't even making a dent because we were just trying to like pay off the interest. So
people can learn that this is how, we can, you can actually get over this without getting too stressed out and thinking life is really essentially you're doomed.
Right. And that was what I wanted to share with people, which is how I ended up writing this book, because initially you come into this and you're just so overwhelmed and you're like, there's no way, like, I'm not making a lot of money. I'm just graduated. Like, how am I going to pay this off? And once you start and truly just make a budget, it's easy. And that was how I kind of positioned it to a lot of people that once we started, because I'll still get people asking, like, how did you do it? And I have a friend who's paid off almost like $275,000 in less than 2 years because they just, you know, like you have blinders on and you just start paying off those loans. So what we did, again, we met with a financial advisor who at the time, I think it was like a 2-hour consult, and they gave us like an Excel spreadsheet, and I think it was like $200, and I didn't want to pay it. I'm like, it's not worth it for $200. And now looking back, I'm like, that changed my whole life, that little $200. But what we did was, and I still do this, you literally just go through your day-to-day life and figure out what you're spending, because you don't realize the amount that you're spending probably per day or per month, because it's really based on a monthly budget, until you're tracking it. Like, you know, that coffee that you got at Starbucks, or, you know, you picked up something here, I'm eating out for lunch every day. And once you track all these and you can visually see all of your money going out, it makes you kind of take a step back and be like, oh, you know, if I just eliminate a few of these expenses, I can save, you know, $1,000 a month in just like silly stuff, you know?
Right.
And then really just having intention with your money and your finances, because that was my other concern. Like, I don't want to, you know, just be miserable for, you know, however many years I have to pay off these loans, but you kind of budget in what's important to you. And I always said, like, traveling is huge for me, and just, you know, having that vacation to look forward to. So budgeting it throughout the year, by the time it comes, you know, I've got a sum of money that I can put to that vacation.
At the end of the day, at the end of 4 years, if that's what you go, you could be looking at over 100,000, even more in student loan debt. So what advice would you give people? And basically they're saying, listen, you can still live life at the same time. Not
Right.
You need to be living like you know, like a hermit or whatever. You can still do things, but at the same time, finding a way to compromise and do both.
Yeah. So I'll start with what you mentioned. Dave Ramsey was like that was our plan. So when I did start this, I was living that like super strict Dave Ramsey life just until we got the loans paid off. But it is, you take what works for you and kind of like mold it, because some of the things just aren't realistic for everyone. Like you mentioned, the credit cards and things like that. It's just, why not, you know, get all of my free flights? But for those that are going, you know, just into school or into college, I would definitely, if I could go back and do it, I probably wouldn't do the 4-year private school type of thing, you know. But, you know, community college for 2 years alone, you wouldn't need a student loan. You wouldn't need any loans, you know, you pay that off immediately. And really the goal is to never have to loan money, unless, even for a house, you know, which is impossible to do in most places. But if you don't have the money and you don't have the cash, then essentially you don't get it. So for college, I would say, you know, 2 years and you pay out of pocket. If you don't have it, maybe you just wait a year and work and get that money, you know, to pay for those semesters. And then you go to a 2-year school to get what your focus is on. Because for me personally, I don't think my degree, no matter where I got it, matters much. And again, that's my industry, but you don't really need a degree. I don't know if you would disagree, Brian, but you kind of just, you learn as you go, and it's relationships and hard work. So that is what I tell, you know, my sister-in-law was in school going back and forth, and we're like, go to community school until you kind of learn and figure out what you want to do. And then you can also work on the side and pay for cash just as you go.